So the benefits to business is largely the fact that today, globally, there's a shift which is happening towards sustainable products. And whether we like it or not, we will have to move towards adopting circular economy practices, because when you are catering to, let's say, global brands or even to some of the large manufacturers in India, they have made very clear commitments that they will become net zero by 2050, which basically means that their carbon consumption or carbon emission by 2050 will come down to zero. So there's a very clear business requirement for manufacturers today to adopt sustainably, because that's something which their larger buyers are looking at.
This is episode number 31 of MSME Talk on circular economy and MSMEs with Siddharth Lula.
Welcome back to MSME Talk podcast. MSME Talk podcast is for micro, small, medium enterprises, startups and entrepreneurs, in which we discuss with industry experts and experienced entrepreneurs on specific value addition guidance and solve queries to help build long-lasting businesses.
As MSME Talk's objective is to support MSME startups in scale up and build long-lasting business, we bring another episode for the audience which is relevant in today's time and even more for the future. In today's episode, we will understand about circular economy and related concepts. Then we will explore circular economy in context of MSMEs. Do they need to take circular economy seriously and start embracing it? How the regulation and policies related to circular economy in India and globally impact MSMEs. Can it impact their business's survival? What benefit MSMEs can get by adopting circular economy design? Today we have Siddharth Lula to discuss on this important and very critical topic of circular economy and MSMEs. Siddharth drives circular economy and climate change program in India and Bangladesh for a corporation called IntelliCab. Siddharth is an impact industry professional with several years of business building and consulting experience. He has been instrumental in designing and implementing multi-year, multi-stakeholder programs in priority areas such as single-use plastics, circular materials, energy efficiency, recycling, and future of jobs. So let's welcome Siddharth on the show.
Thank you so much, Tripti. Pleasure to connect with you. Really excited for this conversation, and I think it's a very relevant and apt topic, especially in today's time when we are dealing with climate change as a real issue, and also given the fact that for a country like India, largely our GDP comes from MSMEs, and it's very important that they contribute and also understand concepts of climate change, for which circular economy as a topic is very important to adopt.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, for joining. A very warm welcome, and very keen to hear a little more about you. So could you share more about it?
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Tripti. So I come from a business building and consulting background, and I've had two parts of my journey largely. One has been, wherein I've worked with global consulting firms on different areas, which include growth strategy, market diversification, India entry strategy. And at the same time, I've also been part of businesses in the fashion and retail sector, wherein the entire focus for me has been in terms of ensuring that we can grow these businesses through solutions. These are essentially businesses which focus on luxury as well as creation of premium brands. Hence, for me, I've had the exposure both to consulting and also on-ground experience in working with MSMEs. And when I put both these different experiences together, that has served me very well in being a consultant in different sectors, which help in climate change and also help in creating systems and processes for different manufacturers and brands that I'm working with at this stage.
Okay, very nice. Just for my curiosity, can I know some names of the brands you work with?
So some of the brands that I've worked with in the past include brands such as, 𝐂𝐤𝐫𝐿 Lifestyle, which is in the jewelry sector. There I was working as a consultant, helping them set up a new business, which was focused in the apparel sector at one point in time. I worked with a fashion brand called House of Nita Lula. Also worked with, different manufacturers in areas or let's say in cities like Surat and Ahmedabad, and created mass apparel retail brands which retail through a network of stores like your Sakhi, Seasons, Nehru's, Potes. So, but this really was the work that I've done in my previous life before I got into the entire impact consulting space. And in the impact consulting space, my area largely has been circular economy and also supporting on various programs for climate change. And here I work largely on 4 key areas. One is the usage of sustainable materials in manufacturing. Second is working on processes to decarbonize, or let's just say reduce the carbon consumption in the manufacturing process. Third is looking at adopting innovative business models to recycle waste, which could be both textile and plastic, and essentially ensuring that there is no waste from the manufacturing process that goes to landfill, but it actually gets reused in the system. And lastly, and most importantly, and something which is very relevant from a developing country perspective, like in India or Bangladesh, the fact of creating new green jobs, which are going to be relevant in the future, given that most manufacturing processes are moving towards automation and digitalization and also adapting new solutions for climate change. Hence, it is important for us to look at all these 4 aspects together.
Okay.
And this specific sector, when it comes to circular economy and climate change, I've had the pleasure of interacting and also engaging very closely with different brands, which include, Aditya Birla Fashion Retail, H&M, Target, House of Anita Dongre, Marks and Spencer, just to name a few. And also on the manufacturing side, engaged very closely with some of the large manufacturers, which include a Shahi Exports, Pratibha Syntex, even a Trident and a JJ Mills.
Okay, wonderful. I'm sure by the name which you are taking, it seems circular economy and these concepts have really started taking a birth. So let me ask you our first question for today's episode. What is circular economy and how does it differ from traditional linear economy, which we used to have so far and still have?
Great. That's a great question as a starting question, Tripti. And I think this is very important for people to understand because, even today when we have discussions with a lot of the MSMEs that we engage with, this concept is not very clear. So essentially what I'd like to say that in practice, what circular economy really means is that how do you reduce your waste in your entire supply chain or manufacturing process to minimum. So what happens is that, when essentially products either which we consume or products which are wasted during the manufacturing process, such products don't really come back into the system and they go straight to the landfills. But the process of, ensuring that one, we reduce the wastage of such products. Second is we ensure that we can increase the value from such products in terms of utilizing these products optimally. And then also ensuring that once these products have been, waste has been created, can be reused and recycled within the supply chain. That is the important aspect of circular economy. So what I would suggest or what I would mention is that circular economy really is a model of production and consumption, which basically involves either reusing, repairing, refurbishing, or recycling existing materials and products as long as possible so that the life cycle of these products can be extended. And secondly, also ensuring that the amount of new material which is being used in the production process is minimized. So that really is a circular economy, wherein you've reduced wastage from a manufacturing system and you've ensured that everything that is being created can get reused in the system again to ensure that you don't require any more new materials to manufacture new products.
Okay. So the whole idea is to reduce the consumption of new resources, but to manage from what is existing. And so that the waste is also less and we are using less of new resources. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct. So essentially what we're saying is that you're creating new products, not using new resources, but using resources that have already been used in the past and, ensuring that there is minimal wastage from the system in manufacturing these products.
Okay.
So if I had to go a little more deeper in this, Tripti, what I would say is that, one is when you look at using raw materials, how is it that I can use raw materials which are created from waste? And this waste could be from, let's say, agricultural waste, or it could be from textile waste to recycling or from plastic waste to recycling. So one is how could I do that? How could I use raw materials which are not virgin in nature, but are coming from waste? Then secondly, how do we design products which are more sustainable in nature. So what it basically means is that how do we design better quality products? How do we design products which are meant to last for a longer time? And how do we design products which are durable in nature? Then when it goes to the production process also, in the production process, how do we ensure that our energy consumption is reduced? We are not using any fresh water, but you're using recycled water. How are you using less harmful chemicals and dyes? So these are some of the important aspects that come to production. Then when it comes to distribution, how do you ensure that transportation in itself consumes a lot of energy? So how do you ensure that one is transportation is minimized by creating proper models which reduce the distance of transportation through innovative business models? And then second also, maybe look at moving towards electric mobility or other vehicles which consume less fossil fuels. And then, also in terms of consumption, how do you ensure that once customers have consumed your products and they've disposed of their product, so it could be your clothing, it could be plastic. How can you collect these products, create an entire system to collect this waste, segregate it correctly, recycle this waste, and then reuse the recycled material back in the entire manufacturing process? And what I'd like to add also is that, when we look at the definition of circular economy, usually developing countries, have been adopting a lot of different concepts from the West. And some of these concepts from the West, while a lot of it may be applicable for developing countries, but it's also important to consider a lot of things from the context of a developing economy. So when we look at a lot of definitions that come globally, the entire environmental impact of circular economy is a very important factor. And in countries like India, Bangladesh, Africa too, this is very important. But it is also important for us over here to increase the definition of circular economy to also include the social impact. Because as we adopt these new systems and these new processes in place, it is also going to be important for us to ensure that people who are part of the system, where there's different industries to include, let's say, agriculture, textiles, transportation, understand these concepts and also get better green jobs. So while there has to be environmental benefits and there has to be a positive impact on the planet, there also has to be a positive impact on people who need to get better jobs and better livelihoods. And hence our definition of circular economy needs to include that as well. And another question that you also asked me, Trupti, is what is the difference between a circular economy and a linear model? So while, I know that the definition I've shared of a circular economy does, share a lot of perspective, but it's also important to understand that traditionally, everyone looked at the linear model for production, which was more of the take, make, consume, and dispose approach, wherein in order to increase sales, large quantities of cheap and cheap products were created from easily accessible materials and energy sources. But this business as usual will not work for the future because there is a detrimental impact on the planet. At the same time, we have very limited resources which we can use for a specific number of years, and hence it is important to move to another business model.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Siddharth, for explaining in so much detail what all circular economy comprises of for the different areas and difference with the traditional linear economy. So while, there's so many things corporates and businesses are trying to do it, but what are the triggers to focus on circular economy and why it is becoming such a buzzword nowadays in the Western world? Definitely it is there and coming to the developing world also.
So, Tripti, to be honest with you, I would not say that circular economy is a buzzword anymore. I would say that it is a necessity at this stage. And there are two reasons largely why circular economy has become very important. So the thing is, one is the challenge of climate change is a real challenge that our world is facing. So in fact, every year now, in India, we have the highest rainfall every year on specific days. We have the hottest days every year. And these are real challenges that we are facing. So keeping these factors in mind, globally, there are a lot of regulations which have come in place and policies that have come in place to ensure that manufacturing as well as, companies who are creating products are adopting practices which are sustainable in nature and have minimal wastage. So it has become a business necessity in one way. Second is also the fact that globally, we are seeing a lot of consumer push for sustainable products. The new generation is becoming a lot more sustainable globally. And hence, in order to meet both these regulatory and policy requirements, as well as, to cater to this new demand shift, we are looking at practices which adopt circular economy best practices.
Let's take a quick break.
MSMEs and startups are looking for various kinds of support and upgrade. Are you a product service provider, expert, advisor, consultant, mentor for MSMEs and startups? Do reach out to MSME Talk to list your business. Check the link in the description.
Got it. Obviously, nowadays we see younger generation is very much conscious about what they're using, where it is coming, rather than, if we go back to our time, when we were teenagers, we were not even giving a thought to these things.
So in fact, it's very interesting, but globally, these things never happen. But in India, many people joke with me by saying that, y'all were circular long time back. And the reason for that is that, at least I remember having a large family with cousins. What my eldest brother wore, came to my younger brother and then ultimately came to me. So, don't ask me how many brothers I had, but in one way, we were extending the life of the product. So we were circular in a way.
Very nice. Actually, that should be the way of doing things. And we need to continue that, which was a trend years back, but nowadays, which has gone with the people becoming more, having additional money and income and good salaries or good earning in businesses. But yes, that's something we need to continue. So interesting, Siddharth. Now, while you shared circular economy has a lot of recycling, reducing, and reusing a lot. Okay. So I understand that these are all similar things, but is there anyway something different from sustainability, sustainable products, some kind of reduction happening, or everything is just coming under circular economy?
So to be honest with you, Tripti, there is a very blurry demarcation of boundary between sustainable and circular economy. And what I would say is that circular economy really is a path to reach to sustainable products. I would say that in order to create sustainable products, you need to adopt a circular economy. So, and the other thing also is that, when people look at sustainable products, they talk about, let's say products which have been created from organic cotton, or products which have been created from recycled material. But circular economy is essentially a lot more, wherein apart from just looking at the material that is going into creating the product, you're also looking at the way the product has been created, or the process that has been followed to create the product, the process that has been followed to design the product, and the entire business models that have been used to collect the used resources that can be reused to create products. So I would just, summarize by saying that in order to achieve sustainable products, you need to adopt circular economy practices.
Okay, got it. So it's basically much beyond just sustainable. Very nice. So could you give very few example of circular design strategies which business are following, maybe one or two examples?
Sure. So, today there are many businesses which are following circular design practices and circular design policies. So, for example, let's say Adidas. Adidas, in a specific partnership that they had with this company called Parley, they collected ocean plastic waste. And that ocean plastic waste was used to create fabric which is being used in their shoes. In the manufacturing process also, today, India has ensured that we cannot create coal anymore to power boilers for manufacturing. So by default, biomass has become a feedstock to power boilers. So biomass essentially is basically something which is created from agricultural waste. So throughout manufacturing, when you look at your large manufacturers in India, this is being used.
Okay.
Then another example, and which I would say is a very important example, is in terms of elimination of plastic. So most companies in India and also because in India we have a very stringent EPR policy that has come in place, need to ensure that none of the plastic that is being created by them in order to distribute products or to distribute materials within their factories is wasted and goes to landfill. And hence, there are these systems and business models which are being adopted by these companies to ensure that they can collect their plastic waste and recycle it and reuse that again as recycled plastic, which remains within the system. So for this, we are seeing the rise of many different business providers called EPR solution providers, which manage this for different companies.
Okay. So there's another business of lines which is getting developed. EPR solution providers. Good.
Yes.
So could you share some examples of some countries or maybe some data point or something, which companies or countries globally have been able to implement circular economy practices successfully, or maybe they are ahead of the curve?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a very interesting question, because the thing is, there are countries globally which have started creating policies for circular economy. In India too, circular economy has become very important, and the government of India is working towards creating a circular economy framework. And we are looking at things in a very piecemeal manner at this point in time. But if you look at global examples, for example, countries like Netherlands, France, Italy, these have been ahead of the curve in terms of circular economy practices. So, for example, in France, there is no wastage of food allowed. Everything which is created by restaurants needs to be recycled. In countries like Netherlands, which have got circular economy frameworks, you need to ensure that zero leakage of waste in manufacturing and zero leakage of plastic, plus adoption of renewable energy for manufacturing, where they've set very stringent commitments that they want to ensure that they will go to renewable energy 100% in a very short period of time. Then if you look at a country like Sweden, they've already become the world's first fossil-free nation. And second is also they've got an entire policy in place wherein there is no new plastic which can be used. They cannot use virgin plastic at all. This is something which has been adopted in India as well now.
Mm.
And then if you look at Africa, Africa has created an alliance, which is the Africa Circular Economy Alliance, where several countries in Africa have become a part of that alliance. And they are looking at different areas like food systems, packaging, built to environment, which is largely construction, electronics, fashion and textiles as key focus areas where they want to adopt a circular economy.
Okay, nice, interesting.
And the one thing I'd like to add quickly also is that India is also doing a lot of work in this part now. So we are creating a circular economy framework. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we also have very stringent policies in place for plastic, for waste management, for energy, for water. Industries need to use recycled water. So when all these policies come together, they feed into a circular economy.
Okay. Very nice. So any companies globally which is like recently we saw an advertisement of Apple trying to, showcase their style of doing sustainable things and related to circular economy. Any other company which is doing actively in this?
I would say most global companies, and especially consumer-facing companies, are focused on circular economy. So, for example, if you look at Patagonia in the apparel sector, Patagonia has been one of the first companies which has focused on the circular economy, wherein they want to use materials which are, sustainable in nature. At the same time, with Patagonia, they've also created models wherein if you are someone who's got a Patagonia outfit, you can go back to the Patagonia shop and get those outfits repaired from Patagonia. At the same time, they've also created a network of Patagonia warehouses wherein people could go, come back with their old garments, and also get coupons to get new garments. So this is one example in the apparel sector. If you look at Unilever, if you look at Nestle, all these companies are working towards different business models to ensure that the packaging that they're using is created from recycled material. If you look at companies in the transportation sector, so for example, Maersk is one of the largest logistics players in the world. They are moving to shipping, which is focused on electric mobility. if you look at an entire transportation sector as well, why are Boeing and Airbus moving towards creating electronic or let's say electric options for planes? This is because we're seeing a thrust in every sector in that direction. And if you look at some more examples from home itself, you'll read about how Flipkart is moving towards electric mobility for their transportation, how they're looking at adopting sustainable materials for their private labels. Look at Amazon. There's a lot of work happening with most companies globally now in this entire space. It's just that while they're looking at sustainability, not a lot of people know that they're actually adopting circular business models, but they're driving towards sustainable products and sustainable business practices.
Got it. Interesting. So many different names, so many different things happening around. While you have been telling, so much things happening, the thing which comes in my mind is if we talk in terms of businesses and if we keep MSMEs also in our mind, isn't it a problem for large as well as small businesses if this concept becomes more and more popular? I'm talking purely from the business perspective. So why don't you enlighten our MSME listeners and startup entrepreneurs audience with the benefits of circular economy for their businesses?
Great. And Tripti, thanks for this question. And I'd like to add 2 points to this. One is, so the benefits to this business, the business is largely the fact that today, globally, there's a shift which is happening towards sustainable products. And whether we like it or not, we will have to move towards adopting circular economy practices, because when you are catering to, let's say, global brands or even to some of the large manufacturers in India, they have made very clear commitments that they will become net zero by 2050, which basically means that their carbon consumption or carbon emission by 2050 will come down to zero. In that process, they have to look at using raw materials and working with partners who can help them in that objective. So there's a very clear business requirement for manufacturers today to adopt sustainably, because that's something which their larger buyers are looking at. Secondly, even from a consumer perspective, there is a clear shift in a preference for sustainable products in the West. And in India, we are seeing this happening. So the generation which is coming is becoming more conscious about sustainability. And that is why we're seeing how rental models are coming up, reuse models are coming up. There's a reduction in consumption of high value products which they feel they can waste, and they're buying products that they can use on a regular basis. And most importantly, globally, countries have also signed agreements wherein they are going to reduce their carbon emission. And in this process, we are already seeing a lot of legislation and policies that are coming in place, which will necessitate our manufacturers to move in this direction. So it is better to do it now, because in that case, you're already ahead of the curve. You can get more business. At the same time, you also will not have, you will also be able to perfect your entire business model by the time these legislations come in place.
Interesting. And in fact, Siddharth, nowadays, when you talk and add anything which is sustainable, higher margin gets added to the products. So on one side, I understand the costing would be increasing it, but then again, prices are also increasing by adding sustainability tag to it.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, MSME Talk listeners, hope you have not missed subscribing to our newsletter for the latest news, blogs, podcast updates. Check the link in the description. We don't spam your inbox, and hence we do have one of the highest rate of newsletter opening in the industry.
So this is an very important point. And before you jump to the next question, I want to address this point, because what's very important for us to understand is that, yes, today, adopting sustainable business practices may be expensive. But at IntelliCap, this is the work that we've been doing. So essentially what we've been doing is that we've been, over the last 2-3 years, working with a network of brands and innovative solutions, understanding from these brands what are some of the areas that they're looking at, or looking at finding solutions to become more sustainable or to adopt circular economy practices. So this could be, let's say, energy efficiency, water management, alternative chemicals and dyes, recycling technologies. And in this process, we've showcased 20-30 solutions. Based on their preference, we've tested 5 or 6 solutions wherein we've been able to show what the environmental and the social impact of these solutions is, as in terms of how much the carbon emission reduction is, and also what jobs these solutions create. But most importantly, we also realize that when it comes to manufacturing, especially SMEs, whatever the environmental benefit will be, there has to be an economic viability to the product. So we've looked at solutions wherein you can have a much lower payback period and your costing will remain the same. So there has to be a very clear business case to showcase solutions wherein they have to be economically viable they have to be environmentally positive and also create a strong social impact. And this is important for us as ecosystem enablers, or let's just say, third parties which are looking at helping the industry to find the solutions for our manufacturers to adopt, because by just telling them that do this, this is good for the environment is not going to happen. We have to show a proper business case to these solutions. And that is the job that some of the players like us play.
Interesting. And that brings to you my next question, which is just linked to what you just said. Are businesses willing to take all these initiatives willingly, or they are forced by governments and environment advocates and consumers?
So one is consumers in India is still at a very early stage in terms of moving towards this. Although I feel that shift is going to happen. Globally, there is a very strong consumer movement. You will see a lot of activists talking about no plastic, no virgin materials. In India, I think these things are going to happen. But I would say that there are two kinds of corporates and manufacturers. There definitely are one which do it because they will get better business and there's regulation and policy in place. So they have to meet those minimum thresholds. And hence they are making those moves. And then there are these corporates and banks that we've very actively engaged with and worked with, wherein they're actually doing this because they realize the importance of this from a future perspective and also the importance of this from an environmental perspective. So I would say that it's not an either or. There are both these kind of players existing in the market. But end of the day, there has to be a positive change, and we are slowly but steadily seeing that happen.
Okay. So let it be both the ways. Both the motivators or push should be existing. Either get motivated itself, or let there be a government or environmental advocates push or consumer push. Whatever be the motivation or push, let the things happen.
Exactly. Either way, things need to move in the positive direction. I think that is the priority.
Okay, great. So when you're talking about positive things to move into the direction, what's some of the factors which can enable circular economy?
Actually, this is a very good question, Tripti, and it's also a very tough question, but I will try my best to address this. There are 5 to 6 factors which are very important for us to have in place to ensure that enabling environment is created towards a shift in circular economy. So, for example, one is how do we measure value? Changing the way we measure value really. So, for example, if there are products and services that are being offered today, most people look at only how economically viable these products are. So, for example, when you're selling a product to a buyer, they will see how cheap they're getting it in, what's the price. But you also have to look at how environmentally viable these products are. So that is one important shift that needs to happen, which we are seeing with larger brands. So they are putting systems in place like a Higgs index with their manufacturing network, and they're rating their manufacturers to understand that in creating a specific product, what was the process that went in and how sustainable that product process was. So that is one thing. How do we measure value? Second is creating systems to basically track and recover resources. So ensuring that we are moving away from a linear model to a circular model, wherein when you're getting products from your manufacturers, you're not only getting products which meet your specifications or requirements, but they're also created from recycled materials. And today we're seeing traceability tools coming in place. So for example, brands like H&M are trying to create systems wherein if you go to buy a product, you can scan a barcode and the barcode can tell you from where this entire material was sourced. So it'll give you some sort of traceability in terms of whether these products were coming from virgin sources or they were recycled. So how do we really track and recover resources to ensure that they're created from sustainable inputs?
Interesting.
Third, and very important, is incentives and regulations. So yes, we do require policies, laws, taxes in place. At the same time, from a government perspective, we also need subsidies and standards for products when it comes to adopting a circular economy. Then a fourth point, which is very important, is educating and engaging people. Because end of the day, it all starts with us as a consumer. If you want to ensure that you get sustainable products, then there's no stopping. Then you will ensure sort of start buying more products which are sustainable in nature. And then automatically in this entire process, even the manufacturing systems will change towards a circular economy and create sustainable products for you. And finally, also, it is also important for, let's say, different NGOs, communities, governments to collaborate together, or let's say convene on platforms which is similar to some of the work that we do. So we actually also create these platforms where we have different stakeholders to come and debate in terms of what are some of the structures and systems that need to be put in place to adopt a circular economy. At the same time, also have conversation in terms of what are some of the laws and policies that could come in place to help drive towards circular economy practices.
Okay, interesting and very deep for so many enablers, and a lot of focus, energy, attention, resources has to go for enabling these things to move ahead the wheel of circular economy.
Yeah, because end of the day, all these things are going to feed into designing for the future, So because if all these enabling systems are there, then by adopting circular economy, we will be creating products by reducing waste, extending the lifespan by durability, enhancing the value of these products by ensuring that they have been created by good materials, which have been created by economically viable practices. And also, end of the day, creating these models which can collect waste, recycle waste, and reuse this waste back within the system. So we have a cleaner planet and there's zero leakage of waste in landfills.
Yes. So now if I ask you from the perspective of, you were just mentioning the first part, where organizations like big ones are also cross-checking how their manufacturers are providing the products, what process they are following. So what I understand from you, that it's not only ingredient which is sufficient, it's the entire process which need to be taken care of. So could you give one example of any client where this has to be, taken through, not only ingredient, but the process? How you were mentioning about metrics or the monitors.
Yes, Ruti, absolutely. So with respect to a client, what I would say is that, and without mentioning the name of a client, what I would like to say is that it is the entire supply chain, right? It's also the ingredient or material that goes into it. It is also your entire manufacturing process. It's the way you collect waste and you recycle it. And in the process, also the kind of jobs that you create. So if I had to give you an example, let's take the example of the FMCG sector, right? So now if you're creating a specific product, if these products can be created from materials which are created from agricultural waste as an ingredient or from recycled components, then in the manufacturing processes, what are some of the systems that have been adopted to reduce energy consumption? So for example, are you using solar? Are you using heat recovery systems to ensure that there is zero leakage of waste? What are some of the systems that you use for water management? So ensuring that you're not using any more virgin water or you're not using fresh water, but all the water that had gone into manufacturing, that's getting recycled and is getting reused within the system. How are you using organic chemicals or sustainable chemicals rather than using harmful chemical substances for dyes? And then finally, also looking at ways wherein in your manufacturing process, if you've created some amount of waste, then how can that waste again be reused to create a specific product? And most importantly, when you're going ahead for packaging, are you using virgin packaging or are you using recycled packaging? Because today you can create very good quality packaging by using recycling components. So you don't need to go for virgin packaging. So that is very important. And in this entire process also of waste management, are you working with the different external organizations which can collect, sort waste and also provide employment for waste workers and also create a better working environment for them, which gives them increased income levels, at the same time access to proper welfare schemes, medical facilities. So it's this entire aspect which is very important.
Okay, got it. Is it a fad for big multinational companies to show their efforts toward sustainable, less carbon footprint? Is it really some action happening?
So I would say it's not a fad at all anymore. It's a very important necessity. Yes, I would agree that there are all kinds of players in the world. There are some who would, try to show more work than that has happened. And there will be some that are actually doing work and showcasing that. But end of the day, it's very important for manufacturers and corporates to toe the line and move in this direction because, as I mentioned earlier, globally, the entire push for policy is real. So whether someone is moving in a small stride or whether there are companies which are taking aggressive steps, we are seeing positive actions which are happening in this specific direction. And I would say that the climate change issue that we're facing is a real issue. It is also very important for solution providers as well as third-party organizations to play an important role where they can showcase solutions to some of these larger manufacturers to become more sustainable or adopt circular economy practices, which are also economically viable. Because we cannot tell someone that you have to reduce your environmental footprint if his business is going to shut down. We have to also show him solutions in that way.
Absolutely.
At the same time, when you're asking someone not to use a specific product, like for example, when we're looking at reducing single-use plastic, we have to ensure that there are alternatives available which can provide you the same recycled plastic at the same, at a similar comparative price. Because someone may not mind paying 10 to 20% extra for sustainability, but they definitely wouldn't pay 3 to 4 times more.
Absolutely. You're right. Very right. And that's the challenge. I'm sure, organization of yours and many other who are constantly working to bring solution for these things. Siddharth, we'll just now go to a next related topic, which you have to give a clarification or make our audience understand. Is this circular economy concept also related, or is it different with the Paris Agreement, which we keep hearing?
The circular economy practice is very closely related to the Paris Agreement. And Tripti, what I'd like to share again is that circular economy is a specific way, or let's say it's a best practice to achieve certain climate goals. It's a specific means to the end. The end is really reducing carbon emission to achieve the climate goal. Now, let's take a step back. What is the Paris Agreement really? What was the Paris Agreement? So the Paris Agreement was basically an agreement where in 2015, 196 countries came together and they said that, if the global warming increases by 2 degrees Celsius above the current levels, then in that case, all hell would break loose and, we'll have a big issue. So everyone agreed that we will ensure that we will reduce this change or restrict this change to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is basically, and not to sound too technical, but that is something which was called a science-based target, SBTI. So essentially, in order to reduce the temperature of the earth to go up by 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to have certain processes in place to reduce carbon emission during the manufacturing process. Now, your carbon emission basically, in order to reduce that, is where circular economy practices come into the process.
You were mentioning about carbon emissions, how much manufacturing processes or the transportation or supply chain is ensuring that carbon emission is least in this entire process. And if that is followed, the commitment by all the countries has been made in the Paris Agreement to take care of the global temperature is automatically falls in place.
Yes. And also what I would like to mention more from an information standpoint for our audiences, as per the Paris Climate Agreement, one was how do we make efforts to limit the Earth's temperature increase to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So that was one point. Second is how do we increase the ability to adapt to adverse climate change effects and lower greenhouse gas emissions. So what I mean by adapting to adverse climate effects is in terms of, yes, there are already some impacts happening. So how can different communities, how can people adopt measures and practices to safeguard themselves when they are facing tough situations like, let's say, drought or extreme rainfall? At the same time, how do they reduce global greenhouse gas emission? And third and most important, how do we also make financial flows or let's say availability of capital towards reducing greenhouse gas emission and climate resilient development? So these were the three important things that are conversations that have happened because of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Okay. Is India also part of Paris Agreement?
Yes. There are 196 countries that signed it. India was part of it. Today, there are 195 countries.
Cool. Let's understand more about the carbon credit from you. Okay. This is also something linked to your sustainability and carbon emissions and Paris agreements and all. First of all, what it is about this carbon credit? What is carbon credit?
So this is a very interesting topic. It's also a topic where, a lot of frameworks are coming into process now. It's also a topic which for a lot of people may become very complex, but I'll try my best to explain this as, simple as possible, because these are terms that moving forward, both large and small manufacturers would need to understand, because these are terminologies which I believe in the next 5 to 10 years will become a part of regular lingo. And I also feel that in the future, there could be a day wherein a balance sheet in a company shows how much carbon credit you have. And that's very crucial to understand. So now essentially what is a carbon credit? So carbon credit is also called a carbon offset, which basically indicates, and Tripti had mentioned earlier, that by 2050, there are agreements to become net zero.
Yes.
That means you reduce your carbon emission.
Okay.
In order to achieve that. So in that process, what's happening is that as people are working towards reducing the carbon emission, for every 1 ton of carbon which is reduced, or let's say 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent that is reduced, that 1 ton of carbon equivalent becomes something called as 1 carbon credit.
Okay.
Now, why this is important to capture is that for a large manufacturer, for let's say any manufacturer to share or to say that our carbon production in our manufacturing production has come down to zero, that can be a function of two things. One is you've adopted different technologies and systems to reduce your carbon emission in the manufacturing process. Now that could happen, but with the existing solutions and technologies, maybe you could achieve 60 or 50 or 60% reduction. The balance 40 or 50% would need to be offset by purchasing a carbon credit. So which basically means that let's say if company A has reduced its carbon consumption or carbon emission by, let's say, 80%, in that process, they have been able to generate carbon credits. And another company which has been able to reduce its carbon emission by only 30-40%, in order to offset the excess carbon that they're producing, they can buy these carbon credits.
From company A?
From company
A. Okay. And does company A get money for that?
Yes. And this is the interesting part. So company A does get money for that, because some of these carbon credits can be traded between these companies. In fact, globally, companies like Canada, China, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, Switzerland, United States also have carbon credit trading platforms which are already operational or coming up. In India, we are still in early days of this, but as of this year, India has also introduced something called the carbon credit trading scheme, the framework of which is being created by the central government to establish a carbon trading platform. So this is something which is going to come in.
Okay, very nice.
And if I had to simplify this a bit further, I would just say that imagine yourself as a company just trying to reduce your carbon footprint, and you've made a commitment that you will reduce your carbon footprint by 100% by 2030, as an example. You're able to achieve, let's say, 60% by actually taking measures within your manufacturing process, by reusing waste, by adopting sustainable materials within your supply chain. But the balance could be offset, and I'm repeating the word here as offset, by either purchasing carbon credit or by investing in impact investment funds or investing in sustainable businesses that can give you those carbon credits which your business could not otherwise generate currently, given the technology limitation.
Okay, got it. So there are multiple ways through which carbon credit can be bought. If your business has not been able to generate carbon credit themselves, but both the ways, either of these, it is basically monetary aspect be linked to the carbon credit, and hence it becomes very prominent and important aspect for the businesses to know about it. And as you mentioned in the initial part, that in next few years, carbon credit will just become a very common word among businesses, even at the smaller level of MSMEs.
Yeah, so that is the way I see it. But the only thing I would like to add also is that the importance of carbon credit is not the monetary aspect. Yes, today you can trade carbon credits globally. I think the rate is $10 per ton in some countries or Europe. And, there isn't a set rate also. So depending on It's like supply and demand. Prices can go up to, anything specific also. But the thing is, because there is a regulatory requirement to reduce your carbon consumption to become net zero. So globally, if a company is in a specific industry where they're finding it tough to reduce their carbon emission by adopting measures and practices within their manufacturing system, in that case, they will have to buy carbon credits to offset the excess carbon that they are still producing. In that way, yes, it becomes a monetary benefit to another company just selling it. But it is also important because from a regulation standpoint, you also committed to reduce your carbon consumption. So it's a mix of both.
Absolutely. Nice. Very rightly pointed out that you cannot just only think of the monetary aspect, but you have to think regulatory wise also. Businesses has to take care of that. Which are the top industries which are contributing to carbon footprints, Siddharth?
So in many ways, all industries are contributing carbon footprint, but I would say that definitely there are usual suspects or, few industries which contribute the most to carbon. So one is the entire oil and gas sector. I mean, that is, that's a no-brainer. I mean, that really is sector number one. Sector number two is agriculture. So believe it or not, agriculture is one of the largest carbon emitting sectors. And there's a lot of greenhouse gas emission which is produced in agriculture because of fertilizers, because of cattle rearing, because the amount of water consumption or water wastage that is consumed, which is there in the sector. I mean, if you look at your crops like cotton in itself, look at the amount of water that they use.
Yes.
Then third is fashion and textile. The textile and apparel sector is one of the largest creators of carbon consumption. And you may think why, but the question is, what is the most popular textile fabric in the world today? It's polyester. Where does polyester come from? Polyester comes from fossil fuels.
Fossil fuels. Okay.
Yes. So essentially it's petroleum that is used to create plastics and also used to create polyester.
Okay.
So these are the top three sectors that are there. And then you also have other sectors. And then you also have food processing, transportation industry. Transportation again is like your shipping, air travel, our car travel, construction. So these are among the, top sectors that contribute.
Okay, guys. So my next question is linked to that only, that going forward, more industries can get impacted by the policy linked to carbon credits and these carbon emissions and all. So as now currently and going forward, which all businesses are being actively pushed by Indian government, by government policies to bring changes to follow certain norms which government wants businesses to?
So Tripti, to be honest with you, all businesses are being moved in that direction. But I would say that what we need to take into consideration is that when you look at Government of India policies, right? Policies in terms of moving towards renewable energy. All industries will require energy. So there is a push towards renewable energy in general. Adopting recycled water. Industries require water for manufacturing. That's happening. Government of India has been very stringent on our entire plastics policy. And plastics in two ways. One is, how do you not use single-use plastics? So there's a ban on single-use plastics now in India. And that's why automatically compostable solutions, biodegradable solutions, recycled solutions are coming in. There's a very stringent EPR policy in place, wherein if you don't follow that, companies can get a show cause notice.
Okay.
Which happened last year as well. So how do you ensure that policies are in place to collect and recycle plastic waste? So our leather sector has been a sector which has been one of the largest sources for water pollution. At the same time, it uses a lot of harmful chemicals and dyes. So push towards adoption of sustainable chemicals. So I would say that all industries are going to be impacted by this. Some industries maybe a little more at this stage and some industries a little less. But at the end of the day, if you're using energy, you're using water, you're using chemicals, you are going to be impacted by the policy of the government. And the government of India is also creating a circular economy framework, which is currently going to also look at waste management. So try to see how we can build proper systems in place to collect, separate and recycle waste, which is going to be very crucial to drive towards a circular economy. Because end of the day, that waste stream will get recycled and will come back into your manufacturing supply chain.
Okay. If we talk in terms of the MSME, Siddharth, how much critical at this stage is for MSME businesses to get used to of concept of circular economy, carbon credit, sustainable concept, and start embracing it?
Tripti, I would say, more than the word crucial, I would say for MSMEs today, it is going to be a competitive advantage to adopt these systems. It is crucial in general for all manufacturers now to understand these terms, but I would also say that today, for MSMEs that adopt such practices, they would have a bit of a competitive advantage because automatically, like I had said, there's an entire global push, and the developing country is really the manufacturing powerhouse of the global brands, global consumers. In that case, if you have some of these MSMEs which are adopting some of these sustainable practices, taking the time out to understand what the meaning of some of these terms are, taking some steps in terms of trying to understand how can they make the entire manufacturing process more sustainable, how can they adopt circular economy practices, what are the kind of materials they could use, what are some of the simple systems that they could in place, what are some of the ways that they could reuse waste and reduce their entire consumption of raw materials while manufacturing. And if they can showcase this specific case to some of the larger manufacturers, they definitely would have competitive advantage as compared to other manufacturers to gain more clients because they would be both economically viable and they would also be able to showcase an environmental impact, which is what the larger manufacturers and global corporates are looking for today.
Very nice. Competitive advantage. Rather than taking as a challenge, what's coming ahead for you, how you can turn around that challenge into a competitive advantage.
Into an opportunity.
Yes, an opportunity. Very well explained, Siddharth. Siddharth, now let's understand. So the regulation which you were mentioning, whether it's related to water or the chemical usages or the carbon, etc., in Indian parlance, are MSMEs also getting impacted because they also follow the same policies, or is there some kind of leeway given to MSMEs under these policies? Just a general idea, broad idea.
No, MSMEs are getting impacted, and essentially for MSMEs which are specifically located in specific industrial zones, there are a lot of small manufacturers who may not get impacted by some of these policies, but in general, if you're an MSME operating in an industrial business, then you get impacted by these policies. So imagine your textile manufacturing units in Tirupur cluster.
Mm-hmm.
There are restrictions on the amount of effluent that can go out. Tirupur, in fact, prides itself to be carbon neutral today, but it was one of the first clusters to put in water management systems, and it is a cluster only of SMEs largely. Even with respect to the north, Kanpur and Lucknow, where there's a lot of leather production, there are very stringent policies for effluent discharge and for water consumption. So MSMEs are and I'm sure that for a lot of your listeners who are in the manufacturing sector, they will realize that they are being impacted by a lot of these policies. And I must say that a lot of these policies are only going to increase. In some way today, the government is giving you subsidies for rooftop solar. And why are these things happening? These things are happening because there is a commitment that the government has made that they want to shift to renewable energy within a specific time frame. So MSMEs and SMEs are, I would say largely SMEs are definitely getting impacted by all these things.
Okay, got it. You have been working a lot on the advisory part and related to circular economy and kind of sustainability for the big corporates. And in that process, you deal with MSMEs also because they are the suppliers to these large corporates. So what is the scenario at present in India in MSMEs in respect of sustainability and circular economy? What's your experience?
So my experience is that right now, from an MSc perspective, I think, some of these terms are just coming in. It's still very early days. There isn't much of an awareness on the definition of a lot of these terms. But I also believe that it's very important that these words become part of their normal lingo, or let's say their vocabulary, because 70-80% of India's manufacturing or India's GDP largely is these MSMEs. And if India wants to become a country which is sustainable and meets agreements on the Paris Climate Accord, MSMEs would need to move in that direction as well. Otherwise, it's not going to be possible. And I'm seeing a shift towards adoption of rooftop solar because of subsidies the government is providing. I'm seeing a shift towards adoption of better water management processes. But these are largely happening not because the term circular economy is a part of the vocabulary of MSMEs, but because there are government regulations and subsidies in place which are moving in that direction. But I believe that if the term circular economy becomes popular within the MSME network, then in that case, the MSMEs will also realize that by rather just doing certain things because of government push, there's also a very strong business case for them to adopt these terms and lingos, because that can help them also increase their entire client base.
Got it. Interesting. And very pertinent also for the growth of MSMEs looking forward the changes which is going to come for them coming ahead.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing also is that for an MSME, there are other benefits also, right? Like, for example, if you adopt circular economy practices, you can reduce your costs by, let's say, lowering your usage of raw materials, energy, water. You can avoid fees by waste disposal and landfill taxes, which are there in some places. You can increase your revenue because by creating you yourself said that some of these products can go at a premium. So imagine creating these products from waste and having sustainable products where you can make a larger margin.
Yes.
As an organization, you can improve your reputation. So today, let's just say if you're a large manufacturer, or let's say if you're a brand, and you have two people coming to you, one telling you that, I'll give you this product at a great price, and the other telling you, I'll give you this at a great price. It may be 10-20% more, but at the same time, I've got these clear environmental advantages wherein your buyers would want to buy these products from you. Automatically, which one will you choose? I'm sure that you'll go for the latter.
Yes.
There's an improvement in reputation, and also most importantly, in this entire process, because you're looking at adopting new solutions, new business models, new techniques of manufacturing, you're also innovating and growing because you're going to be creating new ways of delivering products and today which are going to be relevant for you tomorrow. So you'll be ahead of the curve.
Right. Basically, it is going to help MSMEs by remaining ahead of the curve, just to follow, get used to what's happening and bring innovation at that level and
yes,
competitive advantage rather than getting into a survival risk. So it's better than you can convert into your opportunity. Very nice.
Yes.
So that since we are talking on these MSMEs and how they can remain ahead of the curve, would like to understand, see, MSMEs have their own challenges of limited resources, manpowers, obviously time and capital. Can we understand the support and incentive resources at present available for them? Are there any organizations or any regulations which can help them, or any government departments or forums? Could you just share with our audience?
So government, I think, Prithvi, we've covered a lot on wherein there are many schemes for subsidy, which MSMEs can look at, when it comes to solar or looking at new products and textiles like creating technical textiles, or the government of India has planned a specific PLI scheme for specific sectors wherein by adopting sustainable practices, they will get subsidies on the infrastructure. So this is something which was spoken about very regularly. And I would urge the MSMEs to read up on this and understand more about in their specific sector, because every sector will have a specific nuance or a specific benefit to sustainability or a specific policy. That is something that they would need to definitely look at. But what I would definitely say is that when it comes to creating awareness, there are a lot of resources online which one could look at. So, for example, if you look at global resources, there's Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which has got a very good set of resources to go through. In India, you got World Resource Institute. Today, by just one Google, you can look at a lot of consulting firms which have got some really interesting articles and case studies online. If you look at even the IntelliCap website, you will understand some of the work through case studies that is happening on the entire sustainable circular economy side. So online, there are a lot of resources available which one can read and understand. With respect to forums, I would say forums for circular economy are coming up. They are still very early. So, for example, even with the work that we do under the circular economy practice in IntelliCap, we have regular convenings annually. And in fact, on the 19th, we had a specific event where we had different stakeholders from across industries coming in. In fact, the room had around 800,000 people coming in and out of the day. And we spoke about decarbonizing the supply chain. We spoke about innovative materials and solutions that could be used, which are resource efficient. We also focused on just transition and future jobs, where we spoke about what are some of the new jobs that will be created, which should be created and which should be required to ensure that in your entire manufacturing process, not only your process is sustainable, but also people are provided jobs and treated properly. At the same time, I would also say that there are circular economy forums which are there by like a FICCI is doing it, in Indian Merchant Chambers is doing it today, wherein the Textile Association of India, they've created specific verticals now on sustainability. If you look at plastics, you have the Plastic Association of India, which is also doing a lot of work to talk about recycled plastic. So there are different industry associations out there today. There are different global forums, global platforms. In India, there are some of the leading consulting firms like us, which are doing a lot of work to create awareness, which would be useful for SMEs to reach out to and understand the work that's happening.
Okay, very nice. Thanks for giving your inputs. Where all, MSMEs can reach out to gather the information.
And Tripti, I want to just add one thing. What you mentioned was very important, wherein MSMEs have very limited resources. So the thing is that, we also realize that we understand that. So maybe an MSME cannot make very large investments today. But what the MSME should do is maybe understand a bit more about, what are some of the steps that they can take towards reducing their carbon footprint. And out of the 20 things that will be possible for them, at least identify the first 3 or 4 to maybe baby steps in that direction.
Okay, so Siddharth, now let's understand the most important part of the entire conversation we had today was to make our audience warm up and aware what circular economy is all about, what challenges they do have, but how can they convert those challenges into opportunity for them and can remain ahead of the curve. Now, if I ask you, from the guiding principle perspective, which is also some way a last part of our episode, but you can define for our audience, for these entrepreneurs, what some of the steps, immediate steps they can take ahead in their businesses, which can become a guiding principle for them in this aspect, and also some kind of guidance from your side to them.
So Tripti, thanks for sharing this question. I think this is a very important question. Also because through this question, it will be very practical for them to understand how they can move forward in this journey. So one is, I would request all our listeners to take some time out and read about the concepts of circular economy and also understand the challenges that, we are facing because of climate change, but more importantly, understand what are some of the practices and solutions that could be adopted by them in order to drive towards a circular economy manufacturing process. Now, the thing is that I do realize that there may be 10 to 20 things that one could do. One could adopt rooftop solar. One could, look at better water management processes. One could adopt innovative heat recovery systems, smart manufacturing, recycling. The sky's the limit. But with MSMEs, there is a restriction in terms of how much resources we have. And hence, what one needs to understand is, and make an effort to understand, is that within the manufacturing processes, what is the critical areas which are the highest for them from a carbon footprint perspective? So usually energy consumption tends to be 60-70%. The other areas contribute to the balance 30%, wherein you have, let's say, water, chemicals, constituting to, let's say, 10 to 20% of your carbon consumption. So look at what are some of the simple things that you can do. Can you look at adopting renewable energy like rooftop solar? Because the government is giving subsidies on that. What are some of the simple steps that you can do to change your manufacturing process? How can you work with your manufacturer to see whether you can reduce wastage in your manufacturing process? When it comes to packaging, if you're, let's say, a manufacturer of shirts, can you reduce the amount of packaging that goes inside one? And can you also adopt a more sustainable way of packaging? Today, recycled component is at the same price as single-use plastics. So we achieve that. So how can you do that? When it comes to waste management, can you, once you reduce your wastage, and secondly, how can you also ensure that you've separated and segregate your waste properly so that that waste can go to a proper recycling and get reused again? So what are some of the systems that we can put in place for this? And these will not really cost you a lot, but they will go a long way in terms of you becoming sustainable. So these are some of the things that one could really, look at. And then third, I would say, and maybe moving forward, also look at whether you can adopt something, adopt like a Higgs index. It's a self-assessment tool to show what your carbon consumption, carbon footprint is. So a lot of companies are using the Higgs FTM. It's a specific module which is self-assessed, where you have to put in your data points and it shows what your, how you've been able to manage your carbon footprint. So can you study and adopt some of these things, moving forward? So I think start with basic steps, create an understanding, see what are the simple things you can do, make a laundry list of 10 to 20 things that you can do, see what are the first 5-6 things that you would like to adopt today. And then also moving forward, what are some of the assessment tools that you can put in place, which you can show to your buyers that these are some of the steps that you have taken to reduce your carbon footprint and that you're serious about this cause.
Interesting.
So to add to the point, Tripti, what I'd like to mention is that, this is going to be very important, for our manufacturers because, and I had mentioned earlier, while we are seeing this entire shift happening globally, even from an export perspective, some of these systems will go a long way in creating a competitive advantage and also showing the value of the work that a manufacturer is doing to reduce their carbon footprint. In this way, they can increase their credibility, within their entire supply chain network.
Interesting. So basically, how MSMEs who are not following, how they can make themselves comfortable with what all, things are coming under circular economy and how they can adopt them, whether it is related to sustainability or reduction of waste or how consumption is happening, how traveling of their stuff is happening. They can reduce that. They can start improvising it. And all this is going to help in increasing of the businesses because by doing this, they can showcase to the export market. And we already know by the discussion that the international buyers who are sitting, they are serious about it. they see how you are doing manufacturing, what processes you are using it, how much carbon you are putting into it. So that's going to open up. If you're not into export, it's going to help you in getting exports. And if you're into export, it's going to help you increase your export opportunities.
Absolutely. And I would say that for our MSME partners, this is something that they definitely should look at because, not only is there a clear requirement for it today, but at the same time, it is something which is going to help them increase their footprint globally as well.
Yes, and absolutely. And Siddharth, I think in one of the conversation, you were also mentioning about the seasonality, that by increasing the export basket or in overall your revenue, you can also take care of the seasonality which comes in domestic market, or you cater to the various countries globally through export.
Absolutely. Because in the middle I had mentioned some countries that have very stringent policies that are in place now, and automatically you can also communicate this language with some of your partners over there.
Yes, absolutely. So great. Thanks a lot, Siddharth, for a very detailed, deep discussion on circular economy and MSMEs. I hope our listeners who have still not got into the journey of circular economy will get warm up about it and think about it and take maybe some basic baby steps towards it. And who are already into it will get more charged up and motivated to move ahead. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you again in another episode which is related to some similar concept.
Thank you so much, Tripti. Pleasure's all mine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tripti.
Hey, if you like the information shared on the podcast, why don't you give some good reviews to us on Apple or Spotify? Through this episode, I hope you would have got some answers to your queries and guidance for way forward. Do share your learnings from the episode, your feedbacks and suggestions. If you are an entrepreneur and have questions from experts or any particular topic or profile of expert you want to hear, or if you are an industry expert with MSME as a target audience, do reach out to us. Our link is given in the description. And at last, please do subscribe for MSME Talk podcast, and don't forget to share the podcast link with your friends, family and network. Take care. Goodbye.
Happy to share MSME Talk podcast enters peak ranking chart of 10th country in the Apple Podcast country level entrepreneurship category. If you are an expert or provide product or services to small businesses, MSMEs and startups, reach out to us to discuss showcase opportunity in MSME Talk. Contact details given in description.